Hello and welcome back. Joe here, and today we'll be sewing bike leggings or legging shorts. You know what I mean. For the pattern, I am using Danny Choo's short pattern that I believe he provided a while back. I'm not sure if it's still on the website. If it is, we'll link below for those of you who want it. I just used it as a reference just to get the general idea of what the pattern sizing is, and then from there I adjusted accordingly since I am using knit. And when using knit, you're supposed to pattern accordingly and do a few things that you normally don't do for woven fabrics. One of those things is using different seam allowances and making the sizing of the pattern a lot smaller than normal since the stretch needs to be accounted for, otherwise it'll be very loosely fitting. I had an idea that this pattern wouldn't be exactly how I wanted it or needed it to be for this project, but I did want to test it out just to see how it would fit. And you know, when you already have a pattern, you just kind of want to use it, and it's minor changes and just starting all over again. So here it is. It's loose fitting. It's like little basketball mini shorts. Not the vibe I'm going for. Super cute still. So I added a few changes. I squared off that hem at the bottom at the leg of the short and kind of tightened them up a bit, removed the seam allowance and made it a little longer. So as you can see, this is the final pattern, and when I close it up, it's basically the exact measurement of the leg of the Smart Doll, which is what we're going for since the stretch is going to save us and kind of mold to the body. So no curves have to be added, nothing like that. The stretch will save you. Before I go all out and use this pattern for the entire sewing project, I'm going to go ahead and do one sample, test it out start to finish, do everything I need to do, and bam, ended up loving it. It's exactly what I envisioned and what I was going for. So we're going to go ahead and use this pattern. It's approved. On to the next step. Let's sew it up. For materials, I'll be using these two types of spandex. The hot pink one is a lot more sturdy, more thicker, and has a tighter stretch, I guess, while the peachy little light pink one is a lot more flowy, thinner, and very, very soft to the touch. Once your fabric is cut, the first part we're sewing are the two side curves right here. These are actually the crotch seams, and the wider one is for the back, while the smaller one is for the front. When sewing spandex or any other type of interlock knit, I really like to use my serger. I feel like it sews knits a lot better than my sewing machine. I always break at least 2 needles whenever I sew knits with my sewing machine, so it's always a serger, and then I use my sewing machine to fix any stitching mistakes that the serger couldn't handle from the tension or whatever. So just a quick tip. So once your crotch seams are all sewn up, let's go ahead and serge the raw edges, including the hem of the shorts and the waist seam. Serger or no serger, you can definitely take this moment to actually hem the edge of the shorts. However, I won't be doing that. I'll be doing that after I sew the underseam, just because I prefer it that way. If you're like me and have a lot of trouble sewing knits, I've actually learned a few tips along the way, and I'm going to share a really good one when using a serger for knits. Always make sure that your differential feed are always at the highest point. So differential feed affects how the fabric is pulled through your serger, so the longer it is, the longer pulls it does of your fabric, which is better for elastic instead of using the shorter ones, which are a bunch of little simultaneous little pulls that kind of tug the fabric while it's getting stitched and will kind of lead to a bunch of little bunches or gathers. There's even a trick to use your differential feed at the lowest setting in order to gather woven fabrics super easily and quickly. So after serging everything, it's time to sew the underseam. Sewing the seam will actually make everything look a little more cohesive, like an actual pair of shorts. So all you do is open up your shorts, match up those crotch seams. Once the crotch seams are matched up, I like to pin them in place or clasp them with a little clasp, and this just helps keep everything aligned while I'm stitching it down. So all you do is start off at one end of the shorts, run it through your serger or sewing machine, and then tug a little bit while you stitch. And I recommend this for every seam you sew. Pull a little bit and it'll help with the stretch, and it'll make it easier for it to be sewn. As you can see right here, I'm using tweezers to get that little stretch sewn as well at the end. It's one of the biggest problems I encounter. The end of the pieces are always getting serged differently than the other ones, since I kind of have to let go and then it kind of releases at that pull and they get sewn like regular without being stretched. So it's not the end of the world if it kind of looks a little differently. That's kind of what bothers me the most. But another thing that it does is kind of limit the stretch right there in that seam. When you stitch down knit while pulling on it, it kind of allows that fabric to kind of maintain that stretch. So that pull you're stitching down is the pull you're going to have once you're done sewing. There's no way to pull past the amount that you stretched while stitching it down. Otherwise, it'll kind of break your stitches since they have no elasticity to them. Before moving on to the next step, I really want to double check my serging and make sure that there aren't any like little weak points where the tension was not enough. As you can see right here where the crotch seam meets at the underseam, there's like a little bit of like white showing through, and that's because the serger didn't do a good job at stitching over that previous crotch seam that had already been sewn. So it kind of got stuck there a bit. So all I gotta do is just kind of stitch over it a few times with my machine just to make sure that it's properly sewn there and it's not going to be pulling apart. Now it's time to sew the waistband. For the waistband, we're going to create a casing for elastic. I know we do this a lot, but hear me out, it works amazing. All you do is fold it over at a centimeter or half an inch and stitch all around. Do not forget to pull a little bit while you're sewing, and also to leave an opening at one end, usually preferably the back. That way it's hidden and you can't see that opening, but do not forget to leave it, otherwise you won't be able to thread your casing with elastic. Now it's totally fine if your stitching looks a little wonky. Luckily, thank the sewing gods, the gatherers will kind of hide any mistakes and kind of bunch everything together and make it look a lot neater than it actually is. To determine how much elastic I'm going to use, all I do is measure a half of the side of the shorts and double it up. The rest, which is kind of come with a stretch and kind of bring everything in together at the same time. Now all you have to do is thread your elastic through the casing. I like to pin the end that's going to be sticking out from the entrance of the casing, I guess, to the seam allowance. I pin it just to kind of keep it as an anchoring point so it doesn't go through and ruin my work like it did accidentally like 3 times while doing this. And then once you kind of bring the other end through, I like to kind of join them together, hold them in place with the pin, and then move them to my sewing machine and give them a few stitches. But do not forget to double check that your elastic was threaded nicely and it isn't twisted at any point on the waistband, otherwise it will definitely be noticeable. And for those of you who are wondering, I will not be stitching down the opening since it's kind of small and not very noticeable, and the gathers completely hide it. With the waistband done, the shorts look a little something like this. Now, if you don't mind the serging finish at the end, you could definitely just leave it and rock it like that. I almost did that. I personally don't mind. I think it looks kind of cute. There's a lot of clothing out there that just kind of shows the serging like that, or like the cover stitching. So totally fine, you could rock it like that. But for those of you who want to sew it down, this is what we're gonna do next. So to hem the shorts and finally finish off this project, all you need to do is fold it at half a centimeter or 1/4 of an inch and stitch as you pull. The serging definitely helps to serve as a guide and just makes things a little easier in my opinion. So yeah, it's all you really need to do, nothing crazy. And like I said, you could have done this step before you sew the underseam. It's all optional, it's totally up to you what you prefer, what's easier for you, and what works best. And then you repeat to all the other shorts, or as many as you have, and you're all set. So I really wanted to use this little clip as an example to show you guys the results of pulling while you stitch. As you can see, there's that little stretchy ease that you normally would not have if you would have just stitched it without pulling the fabric. And this is when I realized that the crotch seam still needed a few more stitches to kind of keep it together and keep the serging from peeking through. And I also just had a little realization, if you don't have a serger but do want it to be a little more secured, I do recommend that you do a zigzag stitch if your machine lets you. That way you won't have to pull as much when you're sewing. The zigzag stitches are perfect for stretchy materials since they do have that ease that they need to further stretch once they're sewn. And once we're done hemming and sewing everything else, this is how the shorts look. Hit the like button if you're enjoying today's video and are going to use this pattern in the future. Another thing to remember is to evenly spread out all of those gathers throughout the waistband just to make sure that nothing is too bunched up at one area and everything is evenly distributed nicely. So I'm going to try on all the shorts on Choo and see how they fit. Once I'm done doing that, I'm going to go ahead and pick out outfits for all 3 different colors to show you how my girls wear them. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you found the video helpful. If you have it in your heart to help a young struggling artist like myself, please show the video some love. It helps us out immensely. If you're still in the mood to watch more doll sewing content or get some free patterns, go ahead and click the playlist linked on the screen now. Do it!